Good morning. Monday morning, this is Yarrow Kubrin, High at 9 News, rounding out the last week of October. My article is from Nebraska, the Nebraska Examiner. And without further ado, medical cannabis sponsors question ethics of ongoing investigation into Nebraska petitions. Attorney General's office, while defending Secretary of State, denies wrongdoing in the way it's handled ongoing criminal and civil investigations. Allegations of witness tampering surfaced this week as the latest wrinkle in the ongoing lawsuit and an investigation against Nebraska's two medical cannabis petitions. The Nebraska Attorney General's office, defending Secretary of State Bob Evnen in the lawsuit, while also pursuing a separate challenge to the petition, denied any wrongdoing at a Friday hearing with Lancaster County District Judge Susan Strong. At that pretrial hearing, Judge Strong heard arguments on the allegations and ruled that no ethical violations took place. Strong officially divided the trial into two phases if necessary, as she outlined last week. The first trial phase will begin on October 29th, 1 week before the November election. And in that phase, attorneys for John Kuhn, a former state senator who initiated the lawsuit, and Evnen will need to prove that enough petition signatures were incorrectly accepted or tainted by fraud or malfeasance. If successful, the case would continue, likely after the election, with the trio of ballot sponsors behind Nebraskans for medical marijuana able to defend any challenged signatures. The two petitions would respectively regulate and legalize medical cannabis if voters approve. Sidney Hayes, an attorney for the sponsors, had asked Strong to delay the trial due to roadblocks in receiving evidence from the Attorney General's office, whose civil attorneys are defending Evnen from Kuhn's lawsuit. Kuhn is challenging his own set of at least 17,000 signatures on both petitions, while Evnen is challenging at least 49,000 signatures on each of the campaign's measures. A trial by ambush. Hayes said the sponsors were not formally notified until Tuesday of which petitions were specifically being challenged. She said Evnen's attorneys have also not disclosed evidence that is part of an ongoing criminal investigation central to the civil case. Criminal charges have been filed against at least one paid petition circulator and one notary, and more charges are possible. Frankly, our concern is that this will end up being trial by ambush, which is incredibly unfair to our client and undermines the right of the initiative, Hayes said. Hayes said the Attorney General's office has incredible power in its many roles. Hayes alleged that the law enforcement officials have contacted possible witnesses, causing a chilling effect on the most salient witnesses, notaries. What are they supposed to do? A Thursday filing on the ballot sponsor states, if they testify, they face criminal prosecution by the Attorney General's office for non-crimes. If they plead the fifth, they risk adverse interference against a campaign they have fought alongside for years. The sponsors alleged one civil attorney for Evnen reached out to J.C. Todd, a notary charged in Hall County, whose criminal case is ongoing. The sponsor said the state attorney general suggested Todd would benefit if he cooperated. This negates the idea that there is some sort of strict wall between the civilian and criminal division of the Attorney General's office, as they've asserted in their objection to discovery, Hayes said Friday. If there was such a wall, the attorneys in each of these cases would have pierced it. Judge Strong said the allegation was one of basically witness tampering, which the Attorney General's office fiercely denied. Assistant Attorney General Jennifer Huxell said she was more than a little frustrated at Hayes' significant misrepresentations of what had occurred. She said the state never reached out to Todd, as a sponsor alleged, but did reach out to Todd's attorney, Mark Porto. If that is not an exaggeration, I've never seen one, Huxell said. This is simply not true. Deputy Solicitor General Zach Villaganzo, a civil attorney who reached out to Todd's attorney, told Strong it was purely a planning call ahead of Todd's deposition this week. Villaganzo said he asked generic questions about what Todd intended to do and never promised any benefits. I've never spoken to J.C. Todd, and I certainly did not make any representations on behalf of the Attorney General's office because, frankly, I don't have the authority to make any representations regarding criminal matters, Villaganzo said. Porto had submitted a filing in Todd's defense stating that no Nebraska notary had ever been charged in a criminal matter, as Todd has been, for 24 counts of official misconduct, a misdemeanor. That case continues, with Porto asking for the charges to be dropped. Hayes says that Villaganzo's call could give the appearance of impropriety, even if that was not the intent. Huxell said the allegations was a waste of court's time and that it was an offense to suggest Villaganzo engaged in unlawful or unethical conduct. Huxell said she feels the Civil Bureau, which she leads, has been above board as we can, as above board as we can. Strong said she hopes that no one is interviewing potential witnesses involved in criminal investigations unless their attorney is present. Criminal investigation materials. Huxell said the Attorney General's office has 8 independent bureaus, which each carry out specific legal obligations for the state of Nebraska. In a complex case such as this, Huxell said it's not uncommon for the bureaus to overlap, particularly when there is a question of public official corruption in this case, in the case of these notaries. However, the conversation in the criminal investigations were distinct and separate from the civil lawsuit, Huxell said, arguing that materials are not being used in the case. You cannot hamstring the Attorney General's office on one side by trying to subvert discovery and coming in on the backside through our civil case, Huxell said. Strong agreed with Huxell's arguments, but reminded all attorneys that no evidence could be used at trial unless it was disclosed ahead of time. The ballot sponsors' attorneys could subpoena for information, Strong said, but added that she was not sure where that will go. Trial continued as planned. Having denied the ballot sponsors' request to access the criminal investigative materials, Strong also denied a request to delay the trial. Ann Mackin, an Austin-based attorney representing Cohen in the lawsuit, said proceeding as planned was important because potentially invalid votes were tabulated, publicized, or certified. I would think that there would be an interest from everyone in ensuring that, Macklin said. Hayes and the ballot's sponsors' attorneys have repeatedly said such a ruling in the trial's first phase could close to the election, and either way it comes down could cause a real risk of voter confusion. The election is November 5th. Early voting, including on the cannabis petition, has already begun. Villaganzo said if the challenges were unsuccessful, Evnen would have an obligation to alleviate any voter confusion, such as in public statements and ordering votes to be counted. There is still value to your providing a declaration about the validity and the legal sufficiency of these measures before the general election, Villaganzo told Strong. Nebraskans deserve to know, one way or the other, whether the allegations are serious or not. The trial is set to begin October 29th and could last through November 1st if needed. Strong would issue her ruling shortly after. Phase 2 of the trial, if needed, would begin at a later point in this fall. So this is Nebraska. This is the judicial system being used to muck up the will of the voters. This is Yarrow Kubrin, High at 9 News, Monday morning. Let's hear what my other guests and pundits think and feel about what's going on in Nebraska.
Man, Nebraska, man, they got a lot of action going on with their whole voter initiative. This is insane that they got all this going on out there. Like, they just keep on trucking on. And shout out to all these activists out there that keep on pushing this and fighting for this out there. They definitely want it, and hopefully they will get it.
I mean, sounds like harassment through courts, which really sucks for these poor notaries.
Mm-hmm. I mean, but
look, Yarrow can't argue with me, and it almost made his head explode.
I explode every time I think about you. But the point is that the point is that there is an argument in civil law where if you threaten criminality in the use of the civil process, that's actually fraud. That's actually totally illegal. And what is being argued here is that this office, that there's not enough bifurcation between what's going on civilly and what might be going on criminally, and that the supporters of these initiatives are suggesting that the district attorney's office is playing, or I'm sorry, the attorney general's office is playing fast and loose in the way that they are running their processes in both the civil and criminal proceedings.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I hope Saman comes off mute. You are way too high this morning, Saman.
Yeah, I mean, I got some really nice sip hash for, Nick Bradley, in the chat. Nick, I wish I could just put this in the computer and send it to you, bro. It's really calming me the fuck down. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, man, look at that. Look at that.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
So,
Literally.
this is just a normal tactic, right? This is a normal, typical tactic. You know, like go to the people who certify this paperwork, hem them up so that they can't certify anybody or certify any paperwork. And then the processes kind of halt, right? Until those people can figure out a way. And that's just a really typical obstacle that they put out. But like, you know, places like Nebraska are still going to consider cannabis this pejorative thing, right? And they're going to use the terms pejoratively, and they're not going to really accept any other, you know, other thought process or any other concept to be moving forward in their society, because they really want to tighten down, because they think it's better to keep cannabis out and keep it on the street in the black market, probably so they can keep prosecuting, you know, probably black and brown people for cannabis use and sales and whatever and distribution. So it's just one of these ongoing things where you got to break the cycle. Like the cycle has to be broken somewhere. You know, it's young people. It's like, on one hand, the young people are just following the old guard because that's what they've been taught in those really closed off quadranted societies. But it's like, that's how they've survived. And so to go against the grain on that's it's a big movement for someone to do that, especially a young person, when they're, you know, when there's such mounting opposition against those free thoughts. So it's tough. You just gotta, but you know, any day you catch the fish out of water, it's fresh, baby. That's all I know.
Well, I'll tell you what, all these prohibitionists out there in Nebraska, I hope they're putting just as much effort into securing their elections out there and ensuring that dead people aren't voting and illegals and, you know what I'm saying, non-citizens aren't voting, as they're putting into this whole cannabis initiative trying to fight the will of the people.
Well, and that, I think, is what chaps my hide on a Monday morning, or at least this Monday morning, is that it doesn't appear to me from the outside that there is a ton of prohibitionists, that there's a prohibitionist movement. What it appears is that a former elected official, either a state senator or representative, filed this lawsuit and is using the courts to jam up the process, to create this ambiguity with voters about whether the initiative got enough support, will of the people, to even be on the ballot, and to kick up dust and mud and to obscure whether this thing has a chance of even passing, if it has enough votes. And I think that that can have a chilling effect on voters' participation with supporting the initiative, or their desire to see it through. And so no matter what happens with the court process, this Kuhn guy achieved some of those goals by filing the lawsuit. And so I wonder, how did they come up with the 49,000 people that they say are fake? Who paid for all of that? It wasn't just grandma who thinks it's the devil's lettuce. It was moneyed interests. And to Saman's point, why are the moneyed interests putting their resources into this? What do they have to gain by the status quo? And I think that's an important part of the story.
That's absolutely right.
Fair enough.